How's it going, guys? And welcome to our first ever MAEKAN digital session. I'm Eugene, the editor-in-chief at MAEKAN.
And I'm Charisse, the community manager at MAEKAN.
If this is your first time experiencing MAEKAN, we're an audiovisual publication focused on driving community culture forward. Aside from the storytelling aspect, we also comprise the Slack community, as well as talks such as this, or MAEKAN sessions as we call it. So to get things going, I guess, to jump right into it. So for session number 2, we're working with, obviously, Taku, who a lot of you guys are familiar with, also known as Reagan Matthews. We're definitely excited to have him kick things off on the digital front with us. And I think for us, this was an important sort of, I guess, opportunity to bring people together from around the world to discuss and interact with people of all different walks of, I guess, creative life. We can pass it on to Taku for those who aren't familiar with Taku, or maybe it's you're kind of wanting to hear who Taku is from his own perspective. Maybe he can start off with a little bit of introduction.
Cool. Thanks so much, Eugene and Charisse. My name is Taku. Most people know me by that name. My real name is Reagan Matthews. I started as a creative through the music industry or through the music field. I've been making music since 2000 and I can't even remember now, but 2006. Don't try and guess how old I am. And then things happened over the course of my musical career where I really wanted to kind of switch it up, and so I started photography as a hobby, and then obviously that became a very big passion of mine, and that kind of took over in the last 2 years. And it definitely opened up a whole brand new world of creative outlets for me and different business ventures and opportunities. But more or less, that's me in a nutshell. But yeah, I guess for those that don't know, my name is Reagan. I'm from Australia, and doing something like this for MAEKAN is something that I'm very passionate about, just being able to talk with other people about their creative passions and questions they want to fire at me, because I'm no expert, but I definitely feel like it's been a long road from being someone that had no idea what they wanted to do in high school or even growing up, and trying to figure it out in my early 20s as opposed to when I was a kid. It's definitely been an interesting ride, and happy to share experiences and also hear about your experiences too.
Yeah, thanks for that. And to kind of bring it to a point, this whole discussion and dialogue, one of the reasons why we wanted to speak with Taku was there's this increasingly interesting perspective that's going on in the digital world where we all have these fragmented identities. So it's like you might have like your main Instagram account, but you also have side Instagram accounts that represent a different perspective or a part of your identity that you don't want to necessarily commingle with something you show to the public. And I think this is something that Taku has done really well. And I guess it's more of a discussion. Is it good? Is it bad? What does it mean to your work? Because for Taku, I mean, he has his regular account. He started a new film account, and he also has sort of his parody / personal account. So how do these different worlds sort of interact with one another, and how do you create work for those different places? So maybe we can start with that. And Taku, how would you describe your online identity? And like maybe you can go over your different online personas.
Well, that's the thing. Like when I talk to people that I'm friends with, people that are close to me, they always kind of joke around or ingest, talk about how they never know where I am at the moment, or if I'm traveling, or if I'm really in Singapore, or if I'm really at home in my underwear playing NBA 2K on PlayStation. But I find that funny because the internet is such an interesting place where you can be anyone you want to be, and put up kind of this wall or boundary where you don't really let people into your lives 100%, but you can give them little snippets or little fragments of your life. And I've always found that interesting. I've also found that kind of wrong sometimes, a little bit deceiving. But for me personally, the reason why I have so many Instagram accounts, or perhaps the reason why I try and do so many different things in different creative fields, is because you can't really define a person by their social media account. I think it's wrong to do that, or wrong to assume something about someone just due to the content that they provide you or post. You can get caught up in assuming too much about a person by relying too much on social media. So for me, obviously I started off with the Taku Beats Instagram, and that's my main vehicle in regards to sharing people what's happening in my life when it comes to music, when it's touring, or perhaps what photos I'm taking. musical opportunities, and things like that. But I felt like a lot of people found me through photography and didn't really know I made music either, or vice versa. And so I found that kind of lack of being able to pinpoint who I actually am is the reason why I started so many different accounts. I mean, for those that don't know, obviously Taku Beats is my main account, and then I also started something called Taku Fleeks, which is kind of, it feels embarrassing to talk about because it seems so stupid, but that basically is just, if I had an Instagram account and I just wanted to post whatever the hell I wanted, that would be the one. So, you know, I post everything up to my mom's cooking, my mother-in-law's cooking, my wife, boomerangs of me eating Korean snacks. There's no real filter and there's no real method to what I post. I just post whatever the hell I want on that account.
Here's a question, Taku. When it comes to that and creating for the different accounts, do you have full clarity on what goes where? Like, you know, this is for sure going to be here, that's going to be there.
Yeah, definitely. I just definitely come to that point where if I'm about to post something, I know where it's going to go. And even a lot of the people that follow me, or my audience, or that know what I'm about, if I post something stupid on Taku Beats, they'll be like, this is supposed to be for Taku Fleeks, did you make a mistake? So I think it was kind of fascinating that they understand where my head is at as well with those kind of things. I mean, I'll share my screen with you guys real quick, and I'll show you if you're not aware, and just so I can get, you know, a quick plug and some more followers off you. I'm just playing. But obviously this one here is this is my actual Taku Beats account, and as you can see, you know, I've been plagued to post by 3, which I wish I didn't have to, but I enjoy the challenge of actually, you know, having to think about my content posting in these 3. And this is like an advertisement for me. You know, I'm being like completely honest with you guys. This is like my portfolio. So if I want to work with brands such as New Balance, or, you know, my other creative outlets such as Create Explore, which is another account that I run, photos I'm really proud of, stories I really want to tell, and also musical events. So this is all where I post everything when I'm touring the US or Europe. This is where I'll put the posters for those tours. And this is just, as I said, my portfolio. If someone wants to know everything about me, I'd send them here. I don't even send them to my website. 1, because my website sucks at the moment, and 2, I feel like everything you need to know about me here is right here. And then you find on the flip side this very loose, not as curated Instagram. There's a lot of feet on this one. I don't know why. A lot of people getting up too early on planes. During, I found this Korean family that all had happy family on their t-shirts. When I was in Singapore last week, when I'm at the barbershop, my wife. I mean, there's no real filter here. This is just everything. If I was just me.
So when you prior to starting Taku Fleeks, how long have you been doing it for?
I can't even remember.
Yeah,
I think I started.
Did you feel there was like a pressure off your shoulders when you started it, and you soon had an outlet for kind of the fun stuff? Like, arguably, people on, you know, that are brands on Instagram take themselves quite seriously, right? And this is kind of your ability to be more real. Like, do you find that something changed when you had this opportunity, this new outlet?
I mean, I love Taku Fleeks because I literally don't have to think about anything that I post. I mean, I can sit here and pretend that on Taku Beats that I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm gonna post whatever the hell I want to post. But as an artist, that's not true. You know, I'll sit there and think about what I want to post and make sure that it's relevant to my audience because I care. I'm not gonna pretend like I don't care. But Taku Fleeks is, I literally do not. It's just everything. I've never had a chance to have an account like this. You know, when I first started Instagram, because everyone wanted to see my music. Now people want to see more of my photography. If I put a photo of my mother-in-law's cooking, not many people would be interested in that. But, you know, Taku Fleeks is like an outlet for me just to be real. This is 100% me. And it may seem kind of petty to some that this is something that I'd want out of a social media account. But I've always looked at other people's Instagram accounts, like my friends who perhaps are plumbers or tilers or laborers, and their Instagram accounts are like Taku Fleeks, where they just post everything about their life. And a lot of them are very boring, but I like that about them because it's 100% them There's no real thought process. It's just your complete insight into the person that they are.
Yeah, maybe you can go over 823 as well.
Oh, cool, yeah. And then 823 is my film account. I mean, I recently started shooting film after I got married. My wife got a camera for me when we were in Seoul for our honeymoon. And I've always wanted to dabble in film, but I've always been a little apprehensive because I don't want to be that dude that's just doing it without really experiencing it for the first time, due to the fact that I just want to experiment in it. I mean, me and Eugene have this chat on WhatsApp, and it just talks about film. It's called Filmly First. And I find that very refreshing because I feel like everyone in that chat is very new to film. And there's very much like music, there's a bunch of purists in music where if you were to experiment in a certain genre of music, you could be crucified if that's not your lane. You can be poked fun at, thinking that you're doing that just to kind of ride the wave or what's popular at the moment. And I definitely think in photography, film is that lane where purists can jump on your back and say that you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But regardless of all those things, I just wanted to start 823 as a documentation of my journey into film because it's so new to me.
What do you think you've learned from photography based on taking up film versus, you know, obviously being digital first?
Man, I mean, obviously digital will always have its place in my life, especially for commercial work or if I'm doing work for a client. But I feel like the raw documentation of what I see and what I experience is, you can't really beat film just because of the actual process. So, I mean, if you talk to someone and you write a pros and cons about film and digital, film doesn't really make sense because it's so expensive. The cameras that you want to get out there are so ridiculously priced to. The process of taking a shot and then actually seeing what it looks like can range between a day to a week, depending on what film you use. So, you know, the actual process itself is so long, and it can be hard sometimes, but that's why I enjoy it so much. It's slowing the photography experience down for me. It's becoming it's a lot more considered. It's a lot more, you got to have a lot more patience, and there's anticipation as well. Whereas in digital photography, everything is instant. The result is instant. The shot is instant. You can take your shots home within the hour and edit them, and then you're done. Whereas film, it's definitely the process and the experience that I love the most about it. The shots can be, you know, you can emulate film shots with digital, it's no problem. But it's once you start shooting it and you feel the experience, that's what I love about it the most.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that breakdown. Maybe we'll take some questions from the viewers. First up, we have a question from Eric L. Working on several creative fields, music, photography, mixing. How do you
maintain the quality of your work and keep it consistent?
I mean, if you're passionate about, thanks for the question, Eric. If you're passionate about anything, I doubt that you'd want to rush or put out anything out that you're not proud of. I mean, I'll talk about on the musical aspect for me, because that's my first love. Maintaining the quality of your work is definitely subjective to what you see quality to be. And for me, as I started making music and up to now, the level of quality is different. Like when I first started, I listened to the beats that I put out, and I listen to it now, I was like, I can't believe I put that out. I didn't mix it properly. It's sloppy, but now it's changed because I definitely garnered a lot more experience in the music industry, and even my ear has changed in regards to how I mix things. But I think, you know, long story short is that if you are passionate about any creative field, whether it's music, photography, mixing, performing, painting, the more you experiment, the more you practice, the more your taste will be refined. And it's up to you to really control that. And for me, I've definitely seen my work progress over time and change and become a little bit more polished. And that's all I've ever wanted to do. Just continual, you know, growth and learning for me is important. And
maybe we'll take one more question before we hop back into the previous stuff we were talking about. The next one is from Joe S. What would be a good music producing platform or software for someone just starting off?
I mean, for me, when I first started making music, it was Fruity Loops, and a lot of people use Ableton at the moment. If I could change it, I would use Ableton, just because it's so much easier. If you're starting from scratch and you want to make music from point zero, I definitely suggest Ableton. I mean, you can pick up Fruity Loops if you want, but it's very limited, and I found that out just recently. But I still use Fruity Loops till I die. But it can definitely become a handicap after a while. So if you want to learn something, Ableton is probably the most well-rounded, unlimited platform or software you can use.
Cool. Well, maybe we'll jump back into things. Obviously, your career, a lot of it has been bolstered by the fact that the internet exists. But do you ever look back on how your career has developed and wish the internet wasn't so interconnected with it? Like, do you ever feel a certain pressure to be constantly on, always on your phone and whatnot? And does that, do you think, prevent you from creating a certain type of work, or forces you to create a certain type of work?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, as much as I love the internet for what it's done for a lot of my creative fields, I also hate it a lot. Only due to the fact that it sucks up so much of your life, and you end up, as as what this whole panel is about, being someone or catering your work to people which you're not 100% happy about. And if you don't understand what I mean, it's hard to kind of put it into words, but the different Instagram accounts I have, say for instance, Taku Beats, that's probably like 20% of the work that I wish I could put out or I wish I could do, but I'm limited to the social networking account, which has its guidelines and rules and its own kind of faux pas and rules you put into your own head. I mean, even for me posting in threes, I'm kind of stuck in that little pattern. I could easily break out of it, but there's this psyche about social media that doesn't allow me. And there's this whole internal dialogue that goes in my head. If I wanted to stop, what are some of the things I have to do to stop? And it's so stupid, it's really silly. And even when it comes to spending time with my wife, my family, I hate being on my phone when it's after hours and when we're home eating or if we're spending time together. It's something that I'm really conscious about, and I don't want to be that guy that's on his phone while I'm with my wife. Yeah. But I feel like we're stuck into these lives due to social media. Yeah. And if there was no social media, I feel like we would create more freely, more on our time without having to display it, without having to show anyone. It would definitely just be 100% for ourselves.
Yeah. And on that note, I think there's an interesting question that just popped up from Anonymous. If you guys don't feel comfortable putting your name behind a question, you can also ask it anonymously. This question asks, I'm curious, in today's digital world, is it possible to be successful without putting a face behind your work on social media? For example, do I need to post a selfie or portrait of myself for people to relate to my work?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I think, yes, it's definitely possible. And I think people are hungry for that kind of creative work to be put across. People where they don't know what someone looks like, or the whole enigmatic kind of anonymous aspect. It's kind of funny that it's an anonymous viewer asking that too. That whole aspect about creating art is what we're craving for. I feel like we don't want to make our opinions or what we feel about someone based on what they look like. Obviously that's something that we always don't want to do, but I find that Instagram is probably the worst for that. But I think it's very possible, and if it's something that you want to do, it's definitely something you should pursue, and people are definitely hungry for that. And I feel like that's why I appreciate the MAEKAN movement so much, is because MAEKAN is all about rich storytelling instead of clickbaity, temporary content, recycled content that we see so much. I feel like the world needs more storytelling and less. Yeah. I mean, we could talk forever on this. It's lucky we got an hour because it's something that plagues me a lot.
Yeah.
And I've stopped posting pictures of myself on my own account on Taku Beats just because I find it unnecessary. I don't like posting my promo pictures that I take, or even pictures of me on tour. I don't know why I've stopped, but I just have.
Do you feel that social media in itself is a game you need to play? And it's like, it's an interesting thing because social media is larger than any individual, and to best utilize it, you might need to, I guess, you might need to give some things up. Like if you don't feel, if you want to be within that world, then you should do it a certain way. But like for you, it's like kind of gone past that where you no longer feel that you want to play that game. And do you feel that that's going to be, you can do that now because you have, you know, several hundreds of thousands of followers, but could you have done that in the past where you're going to take a stand and be like, hey, I want to write, you know, a 300-word caption for each post I make, although that's not kind of how social media is traditionally operated.
I mean, it's funny you say that, Eugene. So when I first started taking photos, and this is not at all a diss, or I'm not trying to break apart anyone's work. This is just my opinion and how things have changed for me. Because I do honestly believe that all work has merit, regardless if people think so or not, whether they think it's played out or whether they think it's cliche. I even think those things all have its place in art as a general word. But when I first started taking photos, I was definitely into the landscapes, you know, the cityscapes, you know, shooting shoes from rooftops, all that kind of stuff. Symmetry, making sure that, you know, you had these bangers to post online. And people that take photos will know all those, you know, bangers that I talk about. But it's, you know, as I started taking more photos and learning more about photography, and obviously different things started to appeal to me. But those things that appeal to me, for instance, portraits, pictures of people, abstract photography, they're not as popular on Instagram as, say, New York City from a helicopter. You probably get half the amount of likes and half the amount of comments, half the amount of engagement. And that's just talking from a strict, you know, stats side. But I was willing to take that sacrifice and not have as much traction or engagement on my Instagram in order to go into photography that I really liked and that appealed to me. And the same thing, you know, goes back to music. I first started making music as a hip hop producer, making beats similar to Dilla and Ninth Wonder, but then I went into trap music just briefly. And that's how my name kind of got a little larger, is because I started doing a lot of remix work in that trap dance genre. But a lot of people would criticize it too, you know, think that I was selling out or think that I was doing something I wasn't true to. But that was music I was definitely interested in. It was music that I loved. I love trap music. Whether that's the case now, I'm not too sure. But that's the route I took, and I got a lot of criticism for it. But it's just what I was feeling at that time. You know, I made music that I was proud of and wanted to make, and it's as simple as that.
This is a question that sort of pertains to what you had talked about your style. Jacob S. asked, when I first started following your photography, it was clear to me you had a distinct style. How did you arrive at that style?
I think, especially when it came to editing, I'm colorblind. And there's a lot of colors I can't really identify or see. I can't identify dark blue and purple. I can't identify browns, dark greens, yellows. Pink and gray look the same to me. Some reds I can't see. So like everything to me, and I can't really compare it to anyone else because I don't know what it looks like with someone with perfect vision. But to me, it's a very dull kind of look, you know, a lot of blues, a lot of grays. And that I kind of brought that across in my editing as well, where I would enhance the things that I saw, enhance what I was seeing color-wise. And I think that was definitely my style, where everything looked kind of drab, you know, a little cinematic and very dull. But that's kind of just where I've arrived. In regards to composition, I'm always learning more and more about composition and abstract photography, and looking for something else in a shot that someone might not see. That's something I like to do as well. But you know, I'm still learning. Photography is something I'm very passionate about and relatively new. So I'm still, you know, wanting to evolve a lot more, hopefully.
Yeah. So one thing that was kind of interesting, and before we jumped on this session, we were kind of brainstorming what a good topic would be, and one of that came up that ultimately didn't become the focal point was your, I guess, your whole vantage point on touring, and it's something that you're maybe no longer actively pursuing in regards to touring with music. Can you maybe speak a little bit about why you decided to kind of pull back the reins on that and why you elected to spend your creative energy somewhere else?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, like I don't really tour that much as it is for my music, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. I think the main reason though is that a lot of people don't know is that I'm quite a religious man. I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I'm a Christian, and that's something I'm very passionate about. I'm very active in my local congregation, and the touring life doesn't really it doesn't work hand in hand with that. I've been able to find a good balance up until recently. I mean, 2016 was a busy year for me. I did an Australian tour, Europe, Asia, and US tour. A lot of time away from family, a lot of time away from my wife, and a lot of time away from where I feel, my safest, which is around my family. But I did those just to see what it felt like to give it a proper run instead of doing a couple of shows here, 3 months later, a couple of shows there. I gave it a real good run, and no disrespect to anyone that works as a touring artist, because I think it's a lot of hard work. It's not as glamorous as people think. There's a lot that goes behind it, a lot of sacrifices you have to make, but it's just not the life for me. And it came at a very interesting point where I started doing photography more, and working more as a visual artist. And being a visual artist really asks a lot less of you, where you can work on your own, you can work on your time, you can work at home, and you don't have to be away around all these people, around these music people, and etc. But it was definitely hard because we got an offer to play Coachella at the same time when I was wanting to make the decision to kind of take a break. But I think all in all, the main thing that powered me to do it was family. Definitely wanted to be around my wife a lot more, not put her on the road with me all the time. And also just concentrate on what I want to be when I'm older. So, I recently turned 30, and I don't want to be a touring artist when I've got kids, or when I have a home and I want to be there for them. So I'm really trying to look at doing work on my terms. I still want to write music and put it out. But all in all, I just want to be free from all that. Touring asks a lot of you, and you're committed to a lot of things, and you're on the road a lot, and that takes you out of this creative bubble that I want to be in. I can't write music when I'm on the road. I can't really take photos when I'm on the road. Obviously, touring and traveling the world, you can take a lot of street photography, but I want to do more stuff in the studio. I want to do more photography projects, which will see me plan it and act it out properly rather than just doing things on the fly.
Do you think by not touring that your career as a musician is going to start diverting a certain direction? Like, does a current modern day musician need to tour because in face of I guess back in the day it was piracy, but even now it's like that's traditionally how you create your living, is through touring nowadays?
I mean, the money is the best. When you tour, that's where you get most of your income. And I mean, streaming and royalties, there's a little bit there. Publishing also, there's quite a bit in publishing, getting your music put on car ads and licensed to movies, etc., which is very hard to get into. But touring, man, the money in touring is amazing. But you have to make those decisions sometime. Whereas is having that much money enough of a for you to feel comfortable to make so many other sacrifices? With money comes a breakdown in my own spirituality. Breakdown in communication with my family, time I spend with my wife, less stress. All these things I had to toss up and think about, is money worth all those things that I'm giving up? And my answer at the end was just no, it wasn't. But it was tough. It took me like 2.5 years to come to this decision, because it's it's not one you can make overnight. And I wish I did it earlier, but you know, I'm not going to be one of those people that thinks that they wish to, you know, things happen when they happen. But you know, kind of getting sad thinking about all the money that I'm losing. Thanks, Eugene.
Here's a question from Sky. Would you mind speaking to the benefits, challenges to the international collaborations you've done? I, for example, am in Minneapolis and learned about your work via selection, and more recently from work with a filmmaker in town, Braden Lee.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Braden Lee is, thanks, Sky. I mean, as you know, Sky, me and Braden and the Create and Explore team did a video recently. And Braden is like, he's my dude. So whenever we need video work and there's no budget or little to no budget, he's always down to do something creative. And one day I want to get him something or work with him on something where he's paid what he's worth. But you know, I think working internationally, there's like the benefits are endless. I mean, one, you know, having to know someone like Braden, who's like a super creative and just an awesome guy, that alone is like very rewarding in itself, having a relationship with him. But then also seeing how by coming together and collaborating, the awesome work that you can put out. But not only the result as well, it's the whole process of collaborating with that person. There's things you learn from them. There's things that you can ask them that they'll give you insight on. So your wealth of knowledge just increases, you know, tenfold. And especially if you're working with different people in different creative fields, it's like a whole new world to you, a whole new lesson, and something that you can definitely put into your own work. But if you're looking to go into that creative field, such as, you know, video with Braden, which I'd love to do one day, is, you know, a wealth of knowledge that you can kind of just pick his brain and find out so much about. But collaboration is what makes us artists, I feel. Taking different perspectives and other people's creative processes and seeing how you can work it into your own, I think that's really amazing.
Cool. So we have one more question on our end, and then we'll just turn it over to the viewer Q&A. Can you talk a little bit about pursuing new opportunities and new challenges? When something comes across to you that you've never done before, what goes through your mind? Like, are you scared? Are you worried? Or are you excited? The one discussion I've had with a lot of people is that social media inherently prevents people from pursuing new things, because if they're not at a high level very quickly, then it's almost a sense of shame, even though, you know, some things require a lot of skill and effort to get to a level of mastery. But for you, how do you approach something new? Whether it was I guess photography is probably the big one, but are there any other things that you're pursuing currently that you feel you're excited about?
Yeah, I definitely think there's time to do something new. You just got to go in and do your best and kind of be realistic with yourself too, and knowing that it won't be as great as you want it to be. And it won't be as great as other people who you look to for inspiration. And that's just, you just got to be realistic that way, because if you're going into, say, photography and you've been following these certain photographers for so long, or you have a particular person whose work you love, they've been doing it for, you know, for whatever amount of time. I don't want to put an exact time on it, but they've been in that art and practicing it for X amount of time. So therefore they've had more, you know, a head start. So I think when it came to me going to photography, all it was about was just learning about it and just getting my head around it. And when I say that, I literally mean by having my camera on me every single day, and I still have it on me every single day. There's never a time that I don't bring it with me. So I think you just have to really go into it with 100%, with your whole heart behind it. You can't really half step, because, you know, if you're passionate about it, you're doing yourself an injustice by going in 50%. And also not worrying about what the end result is, because it definitely will change as time goes on and as you start getting better at your art. But when it came to me going into photography, I wasn't really scared. I was just excited to be able to explore this new creative field. I had no real expectations as to where I was going to go. I feel like if I set myself expectations, that I would constantly be letting myself down. So you just got to be really free-minded with it and just roll with it. It is scary because it's something new, but at the end of the day, if you're happy with your progress, and again, not the end result, because the end result will always be, ever changing. If you're happy with the process that you're in and enjoying learning about it and making progress, then that's the only thing you need to be worried about. And after a while, you'll find that your work will get better, and your taste will refine, and just go at your own pace. But never be worried about what the end result is. That's one thing that I've never really spent too much time on.
Yeah. So I'm going to start going, like I said, I'm going to go into the viewer Q&A. There's quite a few questions here. We might not be able to answer all of them, but we'll try our best. The next question up is from Danny H. You mentioned that you didn't want to tour as much for lifestyle reasons. Was it hard to turn down those opportunities from a financial standpoint, or were you comfortable with other revenue streams that made up for it? So like, I think that's kind of an interesting topic, because it's more like an elaboration on what you mentioned. And I think what I find interesting about this question is, like, do you feel that people nowadays should value certain things more than they value the financial opportunity? As in, like, being with your family, like, do you think this world values stuff outside of the financial opportunity?
Definitely. Like, if you value anything for its creative merit first, and I'm talking in a creative field, but also works in business. I mean, for instance, I'm in business with a co-owner who's a good friend of mine in a barber shop in my hometown. And the fact that me and him were both passionate about barbering and the art of barbering and the culture behind it, that was our number one. And we knew if we put that first and put a lot of effort and a lot of passion and consideration into our business, due to our passion, all leading back to the passion for barbering, we know that it would do well on a financial side. And we never really set ourselves, any goals to make X amount of money. It just kind of happened because we were dedicated to making sure that our love for the culture was brought across to our audience, to our clients. And the same thing happened with music and photography for me. Like, when I had to make that decision to stop touring and to give up a lot of income due to saying no to touring, it definitely is scary and definitely can be saddening at times, because money makes life comfortable and there's no denying that. But I've always been very careful too. So even before I started getting to music, I used to work 9 to 5 for a health insurance company for 5 years. And when it came to 3 years working for health insurance, I knew I could probably leave at that point and pursue music and make an okay income. But I wanted to be careful. I didn't want to do anything stupid. So I stuck it out for another 2 years, made sure that my financials were okay for me to make that leap, just in case if anything bad happened, I'd have a backup plan. And the same thing happened when going from stepping away from music. I needed a backup plan. So I think that's where photography came into. I realized that my progression was doing okay, and some people were liking the work I was putting out, and I started working with brands. So I really put a lot of effort and a lot of time into my photography to make sure that I could use that as an avenue for getting by in life if I ever gave up music. And that transition was over the last 2 years, and I feel like it's gotten to a point where I can do that, which I'm extremely grateful and blessed for. But you just got to be smart about it, Don't just throw yourself in the deep end and have no backup plan.
This next question is from Anonymous. 5 to 10 years ago, there was barely any work based on social media, and now every company invests heavily into it. Where do you see the future of social media heading in the next 5 to 10 years? Your fortune teller cap on.
I mean, it all goes in cycles. I mean, 5 to 10 years ago, there was nothing based on social media, and now everyone's like throwing crazy money at it. There's going to be a time where it becomes overly saturated, and that aspect is going to die soon. Instagram is definitely the model it holds for itself won't be around for much longer. I mean, they've already set algorithms for you to see certain things that you're only interested in, and cutting out a lot of other content. There's a lot of advertisement on Instagram, so there'll be a time similar to other social networkings. For instance, SoundCloud had a huge boom in regards to having young musicians' work being heard, but now it's definitely, and much love to the SoundCloud people, because I'm from that SoundCloud generation, it's now a dying platform, sadly, and it's really sad to see. So you can't put all your chips in one thing. I feel like there's going to be a huge resurgence of more tangible events and more tangible ways of seeing work. I'm hoping that with photography or with social media work that it'll now become more to native websites. People that have a large following will definitely, I say this to every person, put more energy into your website now, create an email subscription, because sooner or later your Instagram followers won't be there or won't be as engaged. I think it's up to everyone now to create their own audience through their own website. And I'd like to see more galleries and more initiatives and more, more tangible things where you can actually see and meet people rather than live online.
Yeah. The next question is from Irene K. On the topic of brands, whether that be personal or more business related and whatnot, what is a brand that you admire, and do you find yourself being influenced by these admired brands when developing your own personal brand?
I mean, I'm not just saying this because I'm on this Zoom chat, but if you look at Eugene and Alex, their history, maybe just turn your camera off real quick. If you look at their history of where they came from, I met them when they were working at Hypebeast, and when I first met Eugene and Alex, I didn't know what to make of them because they worked for this mogul, which I thought was a lot more glossier on the outside when I walked into the office. But I mean, Hypebeast was huge, and as a music, lifestyle, fashion influencer magazine, I kind of pondered how long they could go without just recycling the same content. Which, I mean, everyone that's on this chat, you see it all the time happening on Complex. You see it happening through High Snob, where there's just a recycling of information and also products, which each kind of social network cover. But Eugene and Alex made a departure from that life, and they definitely merit a lot to what they learn at Hypebeast, because I think it's such an interesting place to have worked. So I'm not discrediting anyone there at the moment, but to see them take that departure and put more effort into avid storytelling through interesting platform is something that I've always wanted to do as an artist, and kind of align my values in that way. I mean, I could keep doing shoots for, say, for shoe companies, for a whole bunch fashion editorials and whatnot, but the storytelling is what I'm most passionate about. And anyone that's concentrating on rich storytelling and actually having something to say rather than just providing clickbait content is something that I definitely want to model myself against. And if everyone that's on this Zoom chat, you can see how much hard work MAEKAN have put in to be so unique.
Yeah. The next question, thanks for that. I'm not good to receive praise. I'm not very good at handling it, but thanks, to appreciate it. The next question is from, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly or her name, Tang Han. For someone who is 23 years of age and with no musical background, but currently learning music theory, they want to produce music. What advice do you have for them?
Thanks for the question, Tang Han. But I think what you're doing already now is more than I ever did. I mean, if you're wanting to learn how to produce music and you're studying musical theory, you have a head start already on me. I think that's the main thing. A lot of people, a lot of young people, I say young people like I'm 50, but they kind of skip that process of just learning. And they want to get straight to the touring side. They want to get straight to having 1 million songs on SoundCloud and having 1 million plays. But I think right now, if you have no musical background, it's just kind of finding out what appeals to you, kind of defining your sound. And that takes time. That won't happen overnight. So I think definitely by listening to a lot of music that you're into, finding out about different artists and reaching out like you have today. You've jumped on this Zoom chat and asked me a question. And I think Eugene's going to give people my email later. When you have an opportunity to ask other creative questions, don't hold back and reach out as much as you can. Because that's what I did when I first started out. I just reached out to everyone, asked for their help, asked for their advice, and see how they work, and it definitely helped me a lot. So reaching out to people in a similar field and finding out what makes them tick and asking for advice is the best thing you can ever do.
Cool. Next question from Jacob S. What advice would you give on directing a subject during a photo shoot?
I guess with me, when I have to shoot someone, I just make sure that I just treat them like people and not like a subject that I'm shooting. Because even when I would have my photo taken by some people, when I'm on tour or doing promo shots, I found the disconnect and almost being like this monkey in a cage feeling sometimes. But I think to get a rapport going with a subject, before you even shoot, go out and have lunch with them or spend some time actually knowing what kind of person they are, showing personal interest as a human being, and then just talking to them as you shoot too. Obviously, if it was like a fashion editorial and these were models being paid to be in the shoot, it's a little bit different. They're professionals and they know how to move or contour their body or take instructions. So you just have to kind of own it and just be quite forward with the ideas you want to put across. But if you're shooting one of your musical artists that you admire, just get a rapport going, make sure it's as comfortable as possible for you as well, because Lord knows how awkward it can be.
Nice. This next question is from Eric L. Does location and place matter when it comes to achieving nice photography?
I mean, that's subjective. I think it does. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you have the perfect location and it's the right time of day and you have a really interesting looking subject to shoot, then all those things tick the boxes. But if you're walking around the city and you got to kind of hunt these things out for yourself, these scenes or these subjects that come along will just happen by chance. So I think depending on how you're shooting, if you're shooting just casually while you're walking the street, it can come at any time. But yeah, if you're organizing a shoot for a brand or you're doing a job, finding a nice location, finding the right time of day, these things are all imperative to what kind of look you want to achieve. So you definitely have to think about that.
Sorry, I was going to say, does this sort of play into your whole desire to explore? Sort of along the lines with create and explore, like, is there a sort of a side benefit to pursuing these nice, beautiful locations?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, where I live, I don't know if anyone's been to Perth, Australia. It isn't a very interesting city in regards to architecture, in regards to the general culture of the city. It's not as rich as history as, say, somewhere like Hong Kong or New York. It's very, very hard to shoot here. So you have to use your imagination. So the whole being able to go somewhere else to shoot, to me, is very appealing, just because it feels like I'm living somewhere that isn't, it's quite isolated here, and it's definitely hard to shoot here.
Cool. We are kind of rounding out the last 4 or 5 minutes. I mean, I don't know what your schedule's like, Taco. If you want to spend an extra, 5 or 10 minutes afterwards, or you have to run, we can kind of start winding it down. Maybe we'll do 3 more questions. Question from Joe: what direction do you see music moving in? And this is kind of a non-specific question, but just your general thoughts on the music industry and maybe, or just genres of music, and where do you think it's going to go?
I think it's definitely going to go to a more organic lane. Like at the moment, EDM has definitely had its rise. I feel like it's peaked, and there's nowhere else that it can go. It's definitely like plateauing. And I think going back into a more organic, soulful kind of lane is where I feel it's going to go. And it's up to the main tastemakers in music. I'm talking about like the Kanyes, the Beyoncés, the Frank Oceans, to take it down that lane. But you kind of can already hear it going that way. Kanye's latest release kind of went back into sampling a lot more, whereas before he was definitely more into electronic sounds. So I think I find that incredibly refreshing, because that's where I want it to go. But music is funny, man. There's people say hip hop is dead, people say jazz is dead, but if you look hard enough, there's so much out there, and there's so much music of whatever you want to hear, you can find it. Obviously, the trends at the moment are in electronic dance music. But if you don't want to listen to that, you can find something else elsewhere pretty easy.
Yeah. The next one's from Anonymous. How do you split up your time between family and work? Do you have set hours, and do you do your own scheduling across all projects?
Yeah, I do all my own scheduling. It does get pretty hectic sometimes where it can become pretty stressful. You have so many things you have to do for so many different things. You can't really hone into a certain project. But that's where working with different kind of groups of people and creating relationships with different people that have, you know, strengths which are your weaknesses is really important. But I think definitely having set time. I hate having to do work at night after 5 p.m. Just because that's when my wife finishes work, and I'd hate to be glued to my phone or laptop. But sometimes you have to just due to time changes and different locations. You know, if you're working on US time, I got to be up at midnight to jump on a call or to send someone emails or to correspond with someone. But I definitely like to work from 9 to 5, and once 5 comes, it's like just worry about it the next day. But I haven't really perfected that yet.
Yeah. The next one's from Anonymous. You've started to experiment and even started to direct your own videos. Are you interested in making movies in the future?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'm yet to release my first debut album. I put out a lot of EPs and a lot of like small projects, but I've never written an album. And so for my album, I'm definitely looking to go down that lane and to really put in some extra time into creating a whole video audio experience in my album, which is still a while off, but I'm currently working on that, and I definitely want to get behind the camera a bit more. Obviously with assistance because I feel out of my depth, but that's something that I want to get into.
Cool. And maybe the last question, it's actually for both of us, from Anonymous. For both of you guys, how do you work towards developing your brand and developing your following? Maybe you go. Maybe I'll go first with that. For us with MAEKAN, I think the brand side really is a derivative of our vision and what we want to achieve with it. And I think there's two ways of looking at it. The first way being, what is the intangible? What's the emotional connection with that we want people to have with our brand? And then finally, how does that manifest in like physical terms? So for us, it was very clear from the get-go what we wanted to represent, and that was along the lines of we wanted to obviously connect people from all over the world and talk about more meaningful things. I think it's not hard to find out what's going on in other parts of the world, but to have actual context behind it is very difficult. We wanted to have a place to talk about ideas and potentially have, you know, discourse. It wasn't about creating a place where people would just be able to talk and agree about everything. I think it's about pushing each other back and forth and challenging ideas and thoughts. And how does that translate into a brand? I mean, I think from a visual standpoint, a lot of that's defined by Alex, and arguably that part is a little bit easier because it's physical. You can see it with your own eyes, you know what it looks like, but it's more like I guess the essence of it that becomes a little bit more difficult. And in terms of translating that into our following, I kind of am of the same school of thought as Taku, where for us, we would rather put this concept in front of people and have people that are deeply engaged with maybe a little bit of friction to kind of understand and get behind MAEKAN, rather than like, you know, have it open to everyone. Because I think that that's kind of a difficulty in the way publications work, is that everything is sort of run by advertising. So you can so easily check in and check out without any friction. But having just, you know, needing to sign up, needing to be a member, it makes people more involved and more committed. And I think that is like a good example. Like, you guys all took the time to jump on, and you can kind of tell that, you know, there's a lot of great dialogue, a lot of interest and engagement that maybe if it was just open to everybody, I don't know if we would necessarily have received that same level of feedback and interest. So that's kind of how we look at it. Maybe Taku, you can end off the whole MAEKAN session too on your answer.
Yeah, I mean, and just to touch on what Eugene just said, like I've done a couple of Q&As here and there where there's been a lot of people viewing the stream, but a lot of the questions aren't as, you know, articulate as the ones that we got today. Or there's a lot of like, what gel do you use? Which that's not a bad question, because it's an important question. But like, what hair products do you use, etc. So I think that's why I love MAEKAN so much, is that they've created a very considered audience too. And that's something that I'm very passionate as well. Like when creating your brand or creating your audience, a lot of people think, when I said before that, you know, you can't cater for your audience. While I do say that, I create work that I'm very passionate about. I wouldn't do anything if I didn't believe in the product, or I didn't believe in what I was shooting, or I didn't believe in what music I was making. But I definitely do consider my audience a lot and want to make sure that I'm in touch with them and that I talk to them and that I engage with them, because without my audience, you know, I'd be nothing today, or I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have if it wasn't for people that, you know, follow me or have the time to even to check out what I'm doing. So it's important to me to actually connect with my audience and hear their feedback. And, you know, I actually love hearing constructive criticism as well, because you can be stuck in your own bubble doing what you want to do and thinking that you don't care what anyone else thinks. But it's always important to get outside perspective on your work, because you can be on your own bubble and put the blinders up and not realize that you've missed a few things, or there's some questions or some aspects about your work that you didn't realize before that somebody brings your attention to. So for me, I think connecting with your audience, even if you have 100 to 100,000, it doesn't matter. Creating for your audience and whilst at the same time doing what you want to do is important. So it's just it's a balance that you have to create, but it's possible. And I'm lucky enough that my audience are really, really loyal, and also very responsive too, which without that, like, I'd be no one.
Okay, I lied. One more question. Over the course of your career, if you had to look back on one moment, one memorable moment, what would that be?
I honestly think the big decision that I made in at the beginning of this year, just because like 2016 was such a huge year for me, and I've always wanted to play Coachella. You know what I mean? Like it's something as an artist that you see, or you kind of think is that's the marquee. You know what I mean? That's where you wish to play one day. But for me to make that decision based on my own personal lifestyle, but also the creative choice too, I feel free almost. You know, I feel like that I can do what I want to do on my own terms. And a lot of the time, I feel like I am trapped due to contracts or due to the expectation of things that I think I should do or what other people think I should do. But to break free of that expectation and to go the route that I really am passionate about and want to spend the rest of my years doing, that probably was the biggest one for me. Yeah, that and my wedding.
Nice. Cool. Well, I guess that concludes everything for MAEKAN Session number 2. Thanks, Taku, for your time and speaking with us. That's everything. If you guys have any feedback, what you guys liked, didn't like, feel free to shoot us an email. Cool. Well, thanks, everyone, for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.